So as the NBA enters into their brand new lucrative television deal, the league structurally will begin to change and almost resemble an NFL style model where all the teams are almost at the same playing level and they all participate almost equally to a degree in that revenue sharing. And while that transition is happening, there will be opportunities for owners to take advantage of to distinguish themselves and create a new revenue that they don't necessarily have to share with other teams. This is where real estate comes into play. We heard Mark Cuban make numerous remarks of how NBA ownership today really means an investment portfolio for real estate, as the possibilities of that are going to be a lot higher than teams relying on local media revenue. Again, all the NBA teams will be sharing the national NBA revenue, but on the local side, due to the Diamond Sports bankruptcy, over a quarter of the league had lost their local TV revenue. Teams like the Utah Jazz, Phoenix Suns, Dallas Mavericks, they've now collaborated with baseball as well as NHL teams to form their own packages to get their games out to their fans. So in this segment, we'll hear from Brett Comack of Sports Business Journal as he touched base on this topic of how sports teams are moving into real estate and also how they're moving away from dense inner city areas into suburbs because new arenas at the same time look good on a politician's resume. You guys check it out, and every once in a while, I'll check in.
Real estate is such a long-term play that I think it's more of like another asset class for sports owners. It's another kind of consistent source of revenue. If you think about during the pandemic, the Braves, played games without fans, but they still had rent checks coming in from the people that live in the apartments. And there was a lot of pro sports teams that were not getting checks from apartment renters. So that's kind of like the worst case scenario, but it is another steady income stream. And I think one of the most appealing aspects of it for owners is they don't have to share it with anybody else. So, mixed use development revenue so far has stayed out of collective bargaining agreements. I'd be really interested to see if that remains so, because again, I think the players could make the case that the reason people come to the venues that are now the anchors of these developments is to see the players. But for now, they don't have to share that revenue. And
ironically, with the NBA entering into their new TV deal, they've opened up the opportunities for players to gain ownership in certain companies that they used to not be able to participate. I believe liquor, cannabis, and even gambling companies, they can now get sponsorship deals in which they get paid in percentages of ownership or just even stock options.
in terms of the top 4 or 5 leagues, I'm not sure if it'll replace media money. I think that depends on, how streaming and cord cutting and those types of things impact those deals. But, in one of the interesting things about mixed use development that I've been covering is these are starting to pop up around different types of facilities, women's sports facilities, college athletics, training facilities in some cases. So with college and women's sports, you could absolutely see it replacing and surpassing media money. The Kansas City Current, which have been really on the leading edge of women's sports in terms of real estate, opened what is considered the first women's specific pro sports stadium, is also developing real estate on the riverfront down there in Kansas City. So, they are gonna, I think, show that there's places where this can work that don't have to be NFL stadiums, that don't have to be Major League Baseball stadiums. As long as there's some sort of kind of like hub that draws people, draws foot traffic, outside the people that live there, I think, it can be something that works. So that's the other thing. It's probably like more flexible than broadcasting money and streaming money, because, you can sort of make this work in different ways and at different levels. So, and that's why the Braves have been the paradigm for this in the last, I think, 8 years. When I went there, one thing that struck me was, they have there's a lot of apartments around this kind of middle corridor that is commercial and then, ends in the ballpark. The only like flags or banners or displays that I saw on the railings of these apartments that all face inward was the Braves. And so I asked them about that because I live in Charlotte, where, we're a city of transplants. And so if you walk down our similar kinds of areas. You'll see like, 50 different colleges and every pro sports team except for the Charlotte ones. Like, why is it only Braves? And they were like, well, when you sign a lease here, there is a stipulation in the bottom that says you can only hang Braves banners over the railing. And I thought that was like pretty, like sort of insidious, but also demonstrates like the control that teams and owners can create in their environment, which is something that in a lot of cases, especially.
And that same level of control does equate to dollars, as we see the Golden State Warriors, the way they have that ecosystem around Chase Center. They're collecting commercial rents. Even Uber moved into one of their commercial office spaces. And that's revenue, once again, that's not shared by other NBA teams. They can't touch that. And the Warriors also have an outside area with a huge screen where they're able to monetize even when the team is not there. Let's say they have an away playoff game. They can now sell tickets. Steve Ballmer with the Clippers has the same setup in his brand new stadium. So when it comes to owners not necessarily wanting to rely on just a revenue sharing pot, desperation does breed innovation, and there will be plenty of new opportunities.
If you think about like urban arenas or urban stadiums, you could have homelessness, or there could be graffiti, or like boarded up businesses or whatever. It's harder to control that environment because you don't own that land. And so that's one reason why the Braves have been studied so heavily across the industry, is they've created like this environment that they really control. Nobody is drinking Pepsi in there. That is a Coca-Cola safe zone. The amount of teams that are studying this idea is substantial. So mixed use isn't exactly brand new. I mean, you had LA Live open in 1999, where we're kind of in like a 2.0 phase of mixed use. So the thinking around it has gotten much more sophisticated. The real estate industry has gotten much more involved than they had been in the past. You're seeing a lot of teams partner with major real estate developers. Like, for example, the Browns are working with Lincoln Property, which is one of the largest real estate companies in the US.
Also, the same people that own the Cleveland Browns now own the Milwaukee Bucks. And the previous owner came in not only for the team, but they had a vision for that whole downtown area as it's been revamped. Same thing in Oklahoma City.
The Tampa Rays project that fell through was with Heinz, which is another one of these massive national companies. And then there's kind of been there's sort of two paths you can take now. LA Live was the entertainment district, so the sports and entertainment district. You could kind of think of like Texas Live, like around Arlington, where the Cowboys and the Rangers play, would be. Now they have added apartments, but that I think developed originally as an entertainment district. And then the other way is kind of more in the neighborhood direction and trying to create a community. And this has been done less, and I think it's probably harder, but is sort of what the Braves did. The 1901 project around United Center in Chicago is the owners of the Bulls and the Blackhawks have stressed that they are creating a neighborhood, not a hub with an arena and like a Dave and Buster's or whatever. They're expecting to have residents and parks and the New York City Football Club.
Speaking of New York City, James Dolan is one of the NBA owners that has contested this new television deal because he doesn't want to participate in an NFL style model as far as sharing revenue. And with the owners now getting more into real estate, this is where the avenues open up for him to gain additional revenue, while at the same time not having to worry about sharing that money with small market franchises like the Charlotte Hornets.
So I think the trend has been around, but the sophistication is changing. Teams are understanding, better how they can do this. The industry around it is changing and growing. There's more companies and more people that are getting involved and advising, and they're seeing like the opportunity. I mean, another thing that's a huge aspect of mixed use development is sponsorship. So you can make sponsorships more valuable. If you can put naming rights on literally everything, an amphitheater, the yoga classes, the signage can be bigger and different. And it can be sponsorships that emanate from the team and the venue that sort of spread outward. So it's kind of like a lot of the revenue lines of a venue, but just every day of the year, and then some additional ones, like renters, for example. The other thing that the Braves did that was so unusual and that was trend-setting is they opened the stadium and a large portion of the mixed-use development at the same time. So a lot of times the stadium comes online and then the mixed-use development, the great renderings that you see when it's built out, that's like a 25-year horizon. So, maybe you would see that in your lifetime or whatever. So what they did was they opened it at the same time. And so the teams that are moving from the inner city to suburbs are thinking of the same thing. This is what the Bears have done by acquiring Arlington Park. And so they want to have aspects of the development open at the same time as the stadium to kind of immediately start receiving the benefits of the mixed use.
And also, we got to factor in the gambling dynamic. As many other states continue to legalize it, eventually these owners want to set themselves up where they have their arena, they have commercial real estate next to it, they have a casino where fans can fly in from all over the world, stay in a hotel next to the arena, then go to the casino, and then go to the game. That eventually is the ideal setup. And just as Brett spoke about the Atlanta Braves sort of being the blueprint of what teams want their mixed-use stadiums to even look like, the Dumont family that purchased the Mavericks from Mark Cuban came into the NBA with this intention.
The other trend that I think plays into that is this trend of teams sort of pitting submarkets against each other. And so I think, Cleveland and Chicago are great examples of this. DC is another good example of this, what Monumental Sports tried to do. You've got communities that, maybe have a wealthy tax base and have some space and, potentially a mayor or, city council that's really motivated to try to attract the team. And they're, kind of competing against the city. Like, it's like, come out here to the burbs. It's clean. There's room there. You've got space. It's where your fans are.
This almost happened with two NBA teams, the Washington Wizards, they almost went to Virginia, and also the Philadelphia 76ers, they're willing to move across the river in Camden, New Jersey.
And that's true for some sports, less true for others. But I think it's more palatable for the teams. They take less of a reputational hit, by totally leaving the city. I mean, I'm here in Charlotte where the Hornets really have not recovered since they moved to New Orleans and came back as the Bobcats. So that really damages a franchise and is tough to bounce back from. Even if you're welcomed in the new city, you have to start all over. I mean, the Brooklyn Nets, are probably still building a fan base, 12, 13 years after moving from New Jersey. So I think that they're seeking space so that they can pop up the stadium and the development at the same time. And then in some cases they're getting financing or support or, easier zoning laws or more, more cooperation from these communities that are, I would say, punching above their weight in a lot of cases. And I think something that'll be interesting to watch is, when I looked at Brook Park's credit rating on Fitch last year, it was strong. It was like an A. I don't remember what the ranking is, but it was really a really good credit score that basically said they stay within their limits, And the weird thing about the Browns is they're moving within Cuyahoga County, so they're not moving to a new county. And so the county has looked at this like, we're not going to get new tax revenue, so like, what is in it for us? And you can see that because the Browns went straight to the state. They kind of just bypassed the county and they've gone to the state for money. So some of these communities, I think, could be in danger of like biting off more than they can chew. Like we'll see. I don't know if that'll work out all the time, but that definitely happened in Rock Hill with the Panthers when they tried to build the training facility down there, and the city of 60,000 just over the South Carolina border couldn't float the bonds. Like they couldn't do the bonds because they were at a junk rating. So the submarket thing is still kind of playing out. It worked in Atlanta because they found a wealthy area, but and they're owned by Liberty Media, so money really probably wasn't an object. But that's a new trend, and I'm kind of curious to see like if it has like some sustainable legs. It's definitely a market by market thing. A good example is the city of Oklahoma City voted to pay for the majority of a new arena for the Thunder, and that's probably a scenario where they could have moved to another city. I mean, they have the Thunder because they left Seattle. You know, they were the Supersonics. You had votes that failed in Arizona with the Coyotes. Kansas City one was kind of a debacle. I think that was like a pretty poor political campaign that they ran there by sort of weighing down the Chiefs with the Royals. You know, to some degree, they did it together, which was kind of like an odd approach, especially if I was the Chiefs, like you said, coming off of so much success. Um, and then at the same time, you've had like record public money contributions in Tennessee and Buffalo, you know, that were over $1 billion in Tennessee's case. So it really varies by market. It doesn't really track politically. Like it's, you know, it's could be Democrats or Republicans. You know, Republicans who you might think of as more fiscally conservative, you know, have been approving this kind of money. And then, you know, in the state of New York, you know, the governor had kind of an interest, I think, in Buffalo, and so that helped them get into the state budget. And that's what one of the things that I found really interesting covering this is how central politics is to it. I mean, that's also kind of a wild card that varies from place to place. You know, in terms of like the Rays, for example, that deal that they had worked on for 2 or 3 years fell apart after the hurricane came through and ripped the roof off of the Tropicana field. And then at the same time, you had an election, and then a different group of county commissioners came in and were much more skeptical of the deal that had been struck. And I mean, that was some of the worst timing ever. You know, that deal seemed like it was over the line. I had written about it as if it was essentially finished, and then a act of Mother Nature, and then a election, and it, you know, it crumbled. And now that team's probably going to be sold and maybe build a venue somewhere else in Tampa. So yeah, I mean, the politics of it is very unpredictable. I would say, like in DC, for example, you had a mayor that, you know, was kind of I don't know, her public image was almost on its knees in terms of nearly losing Monumental, and then I don't know, like a year later, she's got Monumental sorted out, and is going to bring the Commanders back to RFK. And you know, whether the public should be paying for you know, the venues of teams owned by billionaires or not, you know, I'm not sure. I think probably not, but it also seems to be something that these public officials really like to put on their resume, and that if it falls through, it can kind of hurt them. I mean, I think the governor of Virginia, you know, his credibility took a bit of a hit with the way he tried to ram that deal through, you know, and I think the way he tried to do it actually made people, you know, that he needed to work with bristle at the fact that, like, well, you tried to ram this through without like consulting us, so like, screw you, you know. There's a lot of like, screw you, this is personal, that comes into these like massive deals, and the politics is really unpredictable. I mean, I actually think this is like one of the big fundamental threats for live sports attendance is the cost of attending, because on one hand you have this like insatiable appetite for premium, and you know, people will pay whatever to get closer and to get more access and to have a better experience, and you know, will pay top dollar for premium. But on the other hand, it does feel like the gap is like widening, kind of the almost like the income inequality thing is like really manifesting on sports, because yeah, to just go to a game is so expensive. um, I rarely, if ever, will eat at a game, because you don't really know the quality of the food that you're going to get, but you do know that it's going to be expensive, and potentially like ridiculously expensive.
And also, the average fan is going to get hit twice as hard, because now just going to the games and actually being a fan of the on-court product or just the overall on-the-field product is no longer enough. It looks like the tide is heading towards the direction of going to a game now is almost like going to a resort. It's a whole experience. You checking into the hotel, you play some games at the casino, you hit up a couple restaurants within the same property owned by the same franchise, and then the last stop would be you actually going and experiencing the game. That right there is a game changer. Long gone are the days of just a diehard fan going out there, might get a jersey, but just want to get a couple of beers and just watch the game and just experience the product and just go home. They're slowly turning that fandom into a whole vacation experience. They have everything set up. You can get your drink, your food, your souvenirs, Everything is there in that ecosystem, and there's money to be made. And you can't be surprised by it. It's part of our capitalistic ecosystem. Don't be surprised if this ends up working and teams begin to have their own airlines.
When I've talked to CEOs of the concessionaires, this is something they're like really worried about. The price elasticity, like going to the grocery store is so expensive. So like, how am I going to be able to go to a sporting event if I have kids? And the B, that this kind of run on premium post COVID, that at some point it's going to expire. And I think they're like really caught between trying to max out and get the most out of that, and also like be ready for if it just like drops off a cliff, which it hasn't yet.
And it's a possibility that could happen. The NBA specifically, as well as other sports leagues, they're having a much more difficult time trying to capture the younger audience. And when I say younger audience, I'm talking about kids from anywhere around the age of, I would say, 6 years old all the way up until 18. They're struggling to retain that audience's attention because they have much more options on what to consume than previous generation of kids. And this is where we're seeing the rise of the streamers, the Kai Cenats, the iShow Speeds. The reason why they're getting the multi-million-dollar deals, because they're able to retain a lot of the attention from this demographic. And the NBA low-key had their cheat code. Ja Morant, when he was on his come up, the kids were attracted to him. They gravitated towards him. He was organic on social media, and he was the NBA's ticket to capturing that demographic. A lot of the off-court incidents kind of knocked his star power down the pedestal.
No, I think it's a major issue, and something that when it's as easy to watch on TV and kind of control the environment, it just strikes me that there would be more attention paid to affordability. And you have some of that with the leagues that have more games. They have to do that, but a property like the NFL or even MLS to some degree has really got that demand that is just so there that they can kind of do whatever they want in terms of pricing.
And that demand for premium has even hit the tailgating. There's companies now that offer premium luxury services for tailgating. They'll set up the tent, they'll pre-make the food, they'll even offer Wi-Fi. So there's just a major gap on the options that previous generations had as far as convenience. And a lot of organizations, as well as sports entities, they're adapting quick. But the real question is, will the gap in between those adaptations for them to actually monetize? Because the technology is not the only thing that's moving fast. People's habits, wants, and needs, and even expectations are all changing.